Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1975. We're going to be taking a look at Joan Baez and she's going to be playing through Diamonds and Rust. So let's get Joan up on screen and see how she gets on.
Damn, here comes your ghost again, but that's not unusual. It's just that the moon is full and you happen to call. And here I sit, hand on the telephone, hearing a voice I'd known a couple of light years ago, heading straight for a fall. As I remember, your eyes were bluer than robin's eggs. My poetry was lousy, you said. Where were you calling from? A booth in the Midwest. 10 years ago, I bought you some cufflinks. You brought me something. We both know what memories can bring. They bring diamonds and rust. Well, you burst on the scene, already a legend, the unwashed phenomenon, the original vagabond. You strayed into my arms, and there you stayed, temporarily lost at sea. The Madonna was yours for free. Yes, the girl on the half shell will keep you unharmed.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, the link to this video is going to be in the description below so you guys can check it out and watch it the whole way through without me interrupting it, because it's one of those performances that you do have to watch the whole way through because it is hypnotizing. You'll just find yourself watching all the way through and 5 minutes have gone like that because you're listening to the story. And Joan has one of those voices that just pulls you in. This is not the first thing that you learn on acoustic guitar. With this finger-picking sequence, the playing on the acoustic guitar is haunting in terms of the expression in there and the way that Joan picks out all of those strings, but puts that dynamic change in there as well. She plays it so sensitively, and it's something that takes a lot of practice to get to that point. And anybody that does play acoustic guitar out there, fingerstyle, she's using the thumb pick here as well. But if you have played this track, or you've played any fingerstyle, you'll realize what singing over the top does to it in terms of the concentration you need, but also to have so much of that right hand and left hand subconscious. And there is so much going on here with Joan's playing, because we've got great picking with the right hand, but we've got fills as well with the left hand. We've got slides up the neck. There is so much technically going on that if you don't play guitar, you won't appreciate it. I've done a lot of videos recently on artists who are great singer-songwriters and great storytellers. Joan is definitely one of those, but they are also great musicians and they can keep everybody's attention. Sometimes you get bands with 6 or 7 members that can't do that to the same level. So it really does put the talent and these kind of artists on that pedestal to see how engaging they are, because it's such a rare quality to have the ability to play and sing at the same time, but engage everybody in the story of the track whilst you are singing and playing, and whilst there's so much going on. And Joan has said in the past that her singing voice is something that she was gifted. She didn't work for it. And this is what you have sometimes, that people can carry a tune, they can naturally pick out the pitch of what they hear and what they want to sing. And I think Joan had a natural vibrato, and it's something that I mention in other videos about some singers who have got a fast vibrato and it just always happens at that speed. Joan has got a slightly slower vibrato that is so expressive, but it's natural. She just does it all the time. And listen to her vocal. It's not straight notes here. She's just got that natural propensity to vibrato notes, and it might not be something that she's worked at. It's just something that automatically happens. And the fact that she can sing on pitch, that is something that is natural. Some people can have that. But then on the flip side, you get other great singers who literally start from day one not being able to sing a note, and then maybe 3 or 4 years later they've coached and trained their own voice in order to hold a tune and to apply the techniques such as vibrato. But having that natural vibrato in there, it's so expressive, and a lot of people will spend years and years on vibrato trying to get it as expressive as Joan has automatically. And let's not gloss over Joan's pronunciation, because as a great singer-songwriter and storyteller, it is essential for you to be able to understand what they're saying. And it's something that obviously the top singer-songwriters are so strict with their pronunciation, making sure you know exactly the story that they're telling so that lyrically you don't miss any of those words. And as you can tell, Joan is an accomplished guitar player. We've got some complicated stuff going on here, and she's playing, singing at the same time. I always say it doubles the difficulty, but she started playing the ukulele at a very young age so that she could play along with her favourite rhythm and blues tracks. She just learnt 4 chords, and her parents thought that playing this kind of music might lead her into drug abuse and that kind of stuff. But she went to see Pete Seeger when she was 13 years of age, and she loved it, and she started playing a lot of Pete Seeger tracks and would play in public when she went to her youth club in front of other people. So she's been playing from a very young age, but also learning the craft of performing in front of people, but also learning to play an instrument from a young age as well. And it was when she was 16 in 1957 that she got her first Gibson acoustic guitar, and she moved to Massachusetts when she was 17 years of age, just a year later, and started to get out there and play. In fact, her first gig was just in front of friends and family. I think there were only 8 people there in all, but the venue asked if she could come back and play twice a week, for which she would get $25 for each of those performances. That original performance that she did to friends and family, she got $10 for that one. So Joan and some friends decided to get together and record an album in a cellar, and that was called Folk Sings Around Harvard Square. And after that, she met Bob Seger and also Odetta, and they were 2 of the most prominent singers at the time, folk and gospel. And it was Bob who invited her to go and sing with him at Newport Folk Festival, and that was in 1959. And that was the performance that brought her to a lot of people's attention because of her voice, as we can see in this performance. If you heard this, you would certainly turn your head round to the stage and see who it is performing. So after this performance, she was approached by Columbia Records, who wanted to sign her, but she decided to sign with Vanguard Records because it was a smaller label, and she thought that she'd get a little bit more artistic freedom being on a smaller label rather than one of the big labels. And that's what she was interested in as an artist, and she then released her first album in 1960, and that was called Joan Baez, and she recorded that over the period of 4 days, and that eventually got to number 15 in the US charts. And her second album, called Joan Baez Part 2, that did really well as well, because that went gold, and that was an album of traditional folk songs. She then released Joan Baez in Concert Part 1 and Joan Baez in Concert Part 2. And on that second one of those 2 albums, of the concert albums, that was when she first covered a Bob Dylan track, and that's something that we'll get into later with Bob Dylan. And just quickly quickly about this song as well, because a lot of people think it's about David Harris, but it is in fact about Bob Dylan and her relationship with Bob. I know that she has said in the past that it was about David, but she has now admitted later on that it was just to throw people off the scent. But I think if you listen to the lyrics of the track, you'll be able to tell that it was about Bob. But let's get back into this performance.
Now I see you standing with brown leaves falling all around and snow in your hair. Now we're smiling out the window, that crummy hotel over Washington Square. Our breath comes out, white clouds mingles and hangs in the air. Speaking strictly for me, we both could have died then and there. Telling me you're not nostalgic. Well, give me another word for it. You were so good with words and at keeping things vague. 'Cause I need some of that vagueness now. It's all come back too clearly. Yes, I loved you dearly, and if you're offering me diamonds and rust, I've already paid.
And there we have it. What a great performance on that guitar. And you can see as well the way that she's anchored onto the body of the guitar to give herself a little bit of a reference point for her fingerstyle to make sure that she never misses a string. But also the vocal delivery and the melody, but also the phrasing of this song. This is what I love about this song, because there are no rules here. The way that Joan has written it, it is to tell a story, and it doesn't matter how many words she has to fit in to a particular vocal phrase, she's going to do that to tell the story. And fortunately, because she is such a great singer, but also the pronunciation that I mentioned earlier, because she's so clear, it means that she can mention a lot of words and really increase the word count in one particular line of the song, and it's still understandable. You're still with her on that journey, and you're still in that story. And I mentioned the story of this track being about Bob Dylan, and just to fill you in that she met Bob in New York in 1961, and a couple of years later, 1963, is when Joan had already had 2 gold albums, so she was established in the industry, but now she was getting on very well with Bob, and they had started a relationship, and she would introduce him on stage and invite him up to perform with her. And in 1962, she was on the cover of Time magazine, and this was rare to have a female musician on the cover, so it really shows you how popular she was in 1962. And in 1965 she released Farewell Angelina, and that album had a few Bob Dylan tracks on. She released another album in 66, 67, 68, and on that album in 68, that was called Any Day Now, and that was all Bob Dylan tracks. And then in 69 is when she released David's album, which was an album for her husband at the time, David Harris. And she started to write her own songs towards the end of the 60s, and some of those are featured on I Live One Day at a Time, which was released in 1970. And in 1971, she decided to leave the label that she'd been with for 11 years, and that was Vanguard, like I mentioned earlier. And the last album she did with Vanguard was Blessed Are in 1971. And then she moved over to A&M Records in 1972, and that's when she released Come From the Shadows. And she released 6 albums in all with A&M Records, and one that stands out is Gracias a la Vida, because that was Joan's biggest selling album, and that was in 1974. So she released an album in 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, and in 76 she released 2 albums. And after that, in 77, she moved over to CBS Records and released an album there, Blowing Away, and then also released an album in 1979 with CBS Records called Honest Lullaby. And in the 1980s, Joan did a lot of charity gigs and did a lot of her activism, which is really a part of who she is, giving a voice to those people and organizations that really do need a lot of help to increase the awareness in the public's consciousness, but also about wars as well, campaigning against different conflicts all around the world. But I haven't got time to go through all of that in this video, but in 1985, she's also a huge part of Live Aid, and she opened up the US part of that gig, that whole event in Philadelphia. And in 1987, Joan's second autobiography called And a Voice to Sing With, that became a New York Times bestseller. And just another fact, in 1993, in October of that year, Joan became the first major artist to perform at Alcatraz, the prison on the island, and that was because she got involved with her sister, who was called Mimi. Her younger sister had this organization called Bread and Roses, and it's still going, that provides free entertainment for jails and prisons and nursing homes and hospitals. And in 2003, she released her album Dark Chords on a Big Guitar, which featured songwriters that were half her age, so really helping the younger generation of songwriters to get a foot in the door. Also in 2008, she released her album called Day After Tomorrow, and that was her first charting album in almost 3 decades. And that was the same year that she performed at Glastonbury Festival on the acoustic stage, and the year after that, 2009, is when she performed at the 50th anniversary of the Newport Folk Festival, where it all started for Joan 50 years earlier. And Joan is one of those artists that it's impossible to cover everything that she's done in one video, but just to finish with, in 2017, she had a song called Nasty Man, which went viral, and that was about Donald Trump. And in that same year, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and in 2018 she released her album called Whistle Down the Wind. And as you can see from this video, an all-round performer, musician, singer, and somebody that can hold your attention for 5 minutes and longer just with a guitar and her voice. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!